Under Bond and Policy None Submitted, Operations 2017-18 District Calendar. The proposed 2017-18 District Calendar is being submitted for review and approval. It is recommended the Board adopt the proposed district calendar with August 23, 2017 as the first day of school and May 16, 2018 as the last day of school.
Okay. Are there any questions on the calendar? Would you like to say anything, Mr. Ellison?
Yes, thank you, President Logan. A couple comments. What you have before you is a calendar that looks very much like this year's calendar. The length of the school day, as recommended, is not changing. As you all debated this question last year, and then because of the change to the teacher's schedule, it also required ratification by UTW, was in exchange for having to look at other budget cuts. And that list included outsourcing custodial, middle school, elementary librarians, SRO officers, nurses. There was quite a bit as we looked at various aspects. And while this was not ever a proposal that we felt unfortunately strengthened our academics, it was, in comparison to the other options, the least of a list of bad choices because of continued state issues and with finances. The calendar committee, which does have staff members, administrators, classified, certified, parents, recommended this calendar for at least one more year unanimously because of those options. What it means in needing to look at $3 to $3.5 million that we would need to build into this year's budget. Sadly, we don't have any answers or even an inkling of what might happen in Topeka regarding a new school finance formula or what funding may look like. And we continue to be in a holding pattern, which we'll talk a little bit more tonight in the budget report, but it materially has not changed the issues we face as we have to look at the next budget. And it's for those reasons that both the calendar committee and the recommendation would be to look at continuing the extended day with the shorter school year for at least the 2017-18, and then hope that the financial picture and revenue from the state would change to where this could be discussed again next spring. So be happy to answer any questions that you may have at this point in time.
I'm seeing no questions. We do need,
It's not coming on.
it's not coming on?
Yeah.
Okay, Lynn?
It's either not coming on or there'll be about 6 in a minute. So.
Yeah, well, it's not showing up yet.
I know one of the challenges we face are our triple bus schedule compared to suburban districts. But how else does our calendar differ from our suburban neighbors? I know they can start a little bit earlier because they're only running one start or one bus route for K-12, and they're putting everybody together. What are the other differences we have in our day?
Let me see if I can highlight a few for you. Of course, the triple-tiered busing makes a significant difference when you've got what is a 7 and an 8 and a 9 a.m. start. So at the 7 a.m., that's about 230 buses, with our highest tier being the second tier, that 8 a.m., and that's over 420 some buses. So you can see if you try to even get down to 2 tiers, you'd almost have to double the number of buses that we would have on the road, drivers, and that cost if you wanted to make a change in that. The difference in student contact minutes, when you look across the state, us adding 30 minutes today got us to about the state average. So more than half of the school districts have a longer student contact day than we currently do with the extended school day. One of the other differences is the amount of plan time, and there is compared to most districts, a significant difference in the duty-free lunch period. Our duty-free lunch period is on average twice what other districts have. So, that's an extra 20 minutes where we look at 40 and you think of 20 that is built into the school day as well. So is that?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I mean,
Okay.
that 40 minutes makes a big difference, if we could cut 20 minutes out of that. But that would have to be something that's negotiated.
Correct.
And, teachers would have to be agreeing to do that from that standpoint. And I think the other thing I saw in the teacher communication was that if we could generate the $3 million, if by a miracle we get our job done in Topeka, I'm not real hopeful for 30 to 60 days, but that that $3 million that we saved last time, the jobs as Mr. Freeman mentioned, the custodians and the librarians, they would really like to see that money applied to salaries, teacher salaries. So, and I know again that would be negotiated and whatnot, but I guess one of the things I don't like necessarily this calendar. I think it's, as you mentioned, the best of the best of the worst in that regard. But our hands are tied. I think the other thing to keep in mind too is that morale is really low, but it isn't just in 259. In Topeka, we're talking about working after retirement, and one of the senators says, well, we've got to get teachers to quit retiring at 55 to 58 years of age because of what it's doing to CAPERS. And several, from the school community said, if we started treating teachers statewide with respect, if we started paying them an adequate salary, and if they knew that their salary was going to go up some over the next 3 to 5 years, they would be staying longer. So the problem with CAPERS retirement early is, again, not just a 259 problem. It's a entire state of Kansas. So because of how we have treated the education community in the last 6 years, we are now paying the price for that, and that's unfortunate. But I think, again, as Mr. Freeman said, we do have to work on this together, make the best of what we can come up with. So in that regard, I would make the motion that we adopt this calendar.
I'll second.
Okay, we do have a motion on the floor from Lynn Rogers. And, thank you, Joy. Yeah, please flag me because my cue is not working.
That's coming up.
Okay.
Oh, thank you. I think it's no secret that I'm not going to support this calendar. This is not a good educational decision for our students and our community. And when we think about this 2 surveys we've done, one on behalf of looking for a new superintendent, where employee morale discussing the longer day was a big part of that, which was part of our attention brought to this issue even more so by that conversation. And then with the survey that we had and the number of people who responded and who responded negatively. In fact, in looking in that data, when teachers were asked, did a longer school day have a negative impact on curriculum instruction, 57% of middle school students, 56% of high school students or teachers, and 65% of elementary school teachers agreed that this had a negative impact. It's not a neutral impact, a negative impact on our students. And 74% of our staff said that they're more tired than they were before. So I think it's, when we look at behavior, we look at issues happening in our kindergarten, we look at things on and on that people are talking about, a lot of it has gotten worse with the increased longer day. And I want to talk about this idea that if we go back, we have to cut custodians, because that is not true. That idea that has been floated is not a necessary outcome. And there are other options. Over the last 3 years, our budget managers have been very careful with their budget, And at the end of the year, they've had a 1% or so left, which you would expect a good budget manager to have 1 to 2% of their budget left at the end of the year. In our budget in 2014, we carried $9.4 million over, and we used it for things we needed. In 2015, we used $11.5 million, and in 2016, we carried $8 million over. And recently, board members have been told that next year's budget hole may very well be filled by money left at the end of this year because our budget managers have carefully managed the budget. So when we sit here and talk about what our outcomes and our options for next year are, we're not painting a very clear or truthful picture. There are opportunities and options that we could have pursued as a board and as a district to get our students back to the place where they were with their calendar, where staff and teachers and parents have been very clear about where they want to be, and including students who have also said that. So I'm not going to support this. I would hope that there might be other board members who would agree. But bottom line, this is not a good educational decision for our children. We can figure out a way to change it back. Thank you.
Lynn?
Mr. Superintendent, can I ask the 9.4 and the 8 million that you talked about we carried over? I don't remember those kind of numbers being carried over. We had that in our savings account, but we didn't necessarily add a great deal to that.
And I guess I would have to ask for clarification. In a $660 million budget, there will always be dollars at the end of the year based on positions that may not be filled, things coming in. Those dollars have been budgeted in order to balance the next year. They have not been carried over and placed in savings. They have been part of that budgeting
Right.
process.
I did not say they were placed in savings,
Yeah.
just to clarify. I said they were carried over into items that we needed for the next year. For example, textbooks, special education. But sometimes that money wasn't special education money we were pulling over. I have the statistics here, and I have the last 3 years general funds budget reports from the district showing those carryovers. And I've gone back through the budget reports where we talked about why we were pulling those things over. For example, this year we pulled over additional money for textbooks to balance the budget. But my point is that it is good that we have good budget managers who make sure that we don't go over our budget. That's a good thing. But assuming that we're going to be below and therefore we cannot make a better decision than this is incorrect.
Okay. Lynn, do you still have the floor?
I wasn't finished yet. And thank you for the clarification. But if we carry it over and put it into the next year's budget, then those things would be cut that current year. So it is still a choice that we're making. And so I understand your point that that's what you're saying. But we don't really have a choice of what we spend on special ed. If we're always gonna, I think we're spending 30 to 40 million more than what we get refunded from the state. That's something that we have to control. Textbooks, again, has to be in the bank to do that. So again, they're choices that we're making. And we could choose to do this. But again, then that means that's going to be $3 million that we're not going to spend somewhere else. So, if you go back to when we looked at the $22 million cuts, it was very painful. I think those were your exact words. I think those were all of our exact words. So, it's not none of these decisions are easy, and all of these decisions have an impact. As we've talked about at this table many, many times, even when we cut administration, that cuts services to our schools, which means cuts services to our teachers and our students. So, again, unless we come up, I play this game in Topeka where they say, well, we'll have this money later, and that's not the way it works. We have to, at this table, we actually have to have a dollar cut before we can spend it on something else. So, I don't know how we could do that. So,
Okay, Betty?
There are several things that I want to say, especially when we look at this as either or. Either we go back or and it's not quite that easy. I wish it were. I talked with a lot of parents who really toiled with the idea when that last question was put to them, do you want to stay with the calendar or, I mean, the 3 million was thrown in. And they could see that monkey wrench. The one thing I want to point out from my perspective, what we did last year, it wasn't as though any of us believed that that was the best thing in the interest of students, in the interest of teachers. Our motivation had to do with the budget, trying to stay afloat. And sometimes when you're dealing with a budget, unpleasant decisions have to be made. They don't necessarily be agreeable, you know, but if our goal is to maintain employment, full employment, or to keep employment as high as we can, it's some tough decisions that have to be made. And I don't like the idea that we are making those decisions as a way of not hearing our parents, not hearing our teachers, not hearing their concerns. We are looking at some tough items. Will that impact custodians? We've had that conversation. There's a possibility it could impact any number of employees in our district, but we were trying to look at ways that we could save jobs and keep our doors open. And it's not a good decision. It's not a good place to be. But there are times that you have to look at the lesser of two evils. That's kind of how I'm seeing things, that hopefully we'll get past this. This too shall pass, hopefully. But our focus has to be on employment, and it has to be on keeping our doors open. And how can we do that with the least amount of disruption?
Mike?
You know, my question would be, after listening to everybody talk and discuss this, why are we passing this tonight? Why don't we table this? We don't have a budget. Is there a reason that the district needs to have it today and maybe can't wait for another 2 or 3 weeks?
Yeah, the longer we extend the calendar, the more repercussions it has for our parents, for our learning services department as they look at pacing guides and helping teachers structure what does and how do you fit curriculum into a shorter calendar. Master scheduling, those presets need to be in for our high schools to be able to master schedule. You know, is it possible to wait? The longer we wait, the more implications it has. And to be honest, the more costly it will become because of the amount of manpower and overtime that's necessary to get all those things done in a much shorter time period. For the technology department and our high schools, just as an example, it's those little ripples that come about on the master schedule. We have to, once school's out, basically end the school year, terminate that year through the student management system, and then do a rollover moving all the students to the next schools. And a portion of that for that master schedule is based on the calendar. So there are implications for us waiting. If I thought that there would be something in the next week or 10 days in Topeka that would give us a better idea of where we might be, I would probably be making that recommendation. But given that we're no closer now than we were the first day of the session, I think we, as I've said before, we could easily be into June and July before we have an idea of what that may look like. But did that answer your question?
Yeah, it did very well, and I appreciate that. The other question would be, not to kick our friends in Topeka anymore,
That's okay.
but thank you, Lynn. What happens if we get a budget that we're happy with for once? I realize it's a pipe dream. Don't laugh at me too hard. Come on, guys. What, can we change the calendar later? What does that do with the conversation that we just had?
If you're going to change the length of the school day and go back to a more traditional, it will require approval from UTW. So they would have to hold a ratification on the change of that element to the contract. As it's been explained, part of that came through the e-voice, and then being able to follow up after that, talking about just the lack of timing and the difficulty they would have in doing so. That just becomes more problematic for them, from what I understand, almost an impossibility. Once the teachers would go home, then you're talking a mail ballot, and you're just extending that even further.
Okay.
Yes.
Joy?
I just want to make this clear. This is not a vote on keeping the doors open. That is not, it is not, that's a straw man. This is not about can we keep the doors open or not. Ms. Arnold, you said that. You said the focus is on employment and keeping our doors open. Full employment and keeping our doors open. That's not what this decision is about. We can do both as a district. If we make some decisions here tonight, we can do both. It is possible to do both. And a straw man that, like in this survey, that was designed to get an answer that people want to keep the calendar, only 45% of the people who took the survey said keep it. 38% want to return, and 17% wouldn't answer the question. Because people really don't want this.
Mm-hmm. Okay. John?
I would like to make a comment. This was not a survey that was designed to get an answer. It was a survey designed to get information for you all, which you received.
It was I'm sorry, Superintendent Allison, but it was a bias survey, and Surveying 101 says when you ask a question, you give your two options. You don't lead for an answer. And the question did lead for an answer by any formal survey review.
I would disagree with that. That was not the intent. That was the implication that was there.
It might not have been the intent, but it was the way it was
I would say that's a matter of opinion. That was not what this survey was done. It was done to get the information, and it was a pretty clear-cut decision, as this board discussed it last spring, that the financial decision and the implication would be a $3 million price tag. It did not clarify, nor would this board this year be committed to looking at the options that were on the table and how would you look at finding $3 million in the budget. There may be other options the board would decide on this year. So it was an attempt to put it out straightforward, reminding folks that the decision was based on budget and a $3 million price tag if we were to make that change, and that was all that was there, and that information has been presented as clearly and straightforward as possible.
Okay. We do have a motion on the floor. The motion was made by Lynn, and it was seconded by Jeff. And I'm seeing no other discussion, so please cast your votes.
Ask a question.
Barbara?
The calendar, the calendar that we're looking at right now, this would be the one that we are recommending?
Yes.
Well, I want to make sure we all understand that. And time-wise, will that be later or a discussion, or it'll just happen? I don't want to put you, John, on the spot for that right now, but I know that there's been some talk about a little bit early start.
Okay, your question is around start times. Start times are not impacted by the calendar. So we continue to look. There were a number of suggestions. Could you start 15 minutes earlier? What does that look like? What would be the implications of trying to shorten the run times in between, which we were able to perform that analysis, and it would require an additional 50-plus buses. If right now we need that hour in between each tier. Now, could you move start times 5 minutes or 10 minutes, whatever that might be? That won't impact the number of days or the length of the day. It would just impact the start and release time. So that's ongoing as we take a look at, there's of course pros and cons to each of those, particularly when you've got a 7 a.m. start time. If you move that time up, what issues that creates. So I would anticipate if we have some options around bell time, being able to bring that back to you in short order for consideration.
Would it be possible to have that back for us for the next time?
I believe so. We're shooting toward that. We want to get the impact. If you look at, say, a 10-minute start time, does 10 minutes make enough of a difference?
Right.
Getting some, looking at what are all the implications of doing that. When would pick up times? Those aspects. So as we're doing due diligence on some of those suggestions that were made, then we'll have information for you coming back.
Okay. So tonight we are voting on the calendar only, and the calendar is in front of us.
Correct.
You would be bringing information back about whether or not adjusting times within the calendar for the school day might be possible or might not.
Correct.
Okay.
The length of the school day is defined under this calendar option, and that would not be changing. Potential start or release times are not part of the overall calendar.
And would not have to go to negotiations?
No, if we don't change the length of the work day, then that's what requires approval.
Okay. So is everyone clear on what we're voting on tonight? All right, please cast your votes. The motion passes, wait a minute here, 6-1. Next item.